I have been actually probably of a lot of the interviews that I do, like artist interviews or music related interviews, this one I've been probably one of the more excited about because I found the whole concept absolutely fascinating when I first heard about it. Because I first discovered it from the Billboard story back in
Right,
February,
right.
and I've known about. I mean, being in Western Wisconsin, I mean, the Danceteria is like a totally foreign concept. But I first heard about it about Madonna back in like 1990. The rockumentary came out on her on MTV, and I'm like,
Yep.
oh, interesting. This everybody in Danceteria. What was this? So I've kind of known about it for a while. And again, I've always had kind of a fascination with the post-disco era.
Yep.
Just after that, and that mix of dance music before what I guess you'd call, I mean, and I'm going to really broad brush intentionally here, what we call like late 80s, 90s dance music, house,
Yeah.
techno. And again,
Right.
very
Right.
broad brush.
Sure.
This mid area, post after everything, quote unquote, disco,
Yep.
and all this that you throw into this. Um, I That's a long way of leading up to the introduction question, which was literally your introduction to
Sure.
Danceteria. And you've talked about this a bit, but go into a bit more detail of the first time you walked into Danceteria and what are you experiencing?
Well, I just want to paint a picture for you that there are a number of economic, political, sociological factors that made that world possible. New York was pretty much bankrupt towards the end of the 70s and into the early 80s. It was no one wanted to own businesses there. No one wanted to build residential buildings. No one wanted to open retail stores. So you had this massive swath of the downtown area of Manhattan that nobody cared about. And what a more fertile way to take advantage of that than be a nightclub owner, because you can get incredibly massive spaces, old warehouses, old factories, and the landlords were thrilled to give it away, or not give it away, but charge really low rates. So that's what that was the fertile ground for entrepreneurs, nightclub entrepreneurs, to open these spots. And if you were an artist or a creative person coming from outside of New York City, like Keith Haring, the painter, came from Pennsylvania, Madonna came from Detroit. All of these people came to New York, and because it was such a s-hole, they could get apartments for barely any money. And if they had a day job to pay for it, it did not have to be something that generated a significant revenue stream. It could be something that was tangential to what they loved. So at the Danceteria nightclub, which opened in 1979, but the one that really was the famous address was in 1981. Keith Haring was a waiter. The Beastie Boys were janitors. LL Cool J was a doorman, and Madonna worked the elevator. Sade was a bartender for a little while. So all of these people who were, we would call them influencers, were meeting at this place. And pre-cell phone, pre-computer, you had to actually have a conversation with somebody who was creative. So there were these music makers and artists and dancers and videographers all meeting, all hanging out, and all exchanging ideas. And there was no other place like it in the world, where you had all of these creative people coming together, and then you had all of these music genres that were bubbling and exploding, coming over from Europe, coming over from the boroughs, with hip hop and techno and electro, and they all sifted through 30 West 21st Street. So it was this absolutely insane jambalaya of really exciting stuff going on. And my first time going in there, I was underage. I was 16. I bought a fake ID at what was it? The Playroom? There was a place in Times Square you could buy a fake ID, and they had a photo machine. It looked like garbage, but that's what everybody did. And I bought one, and I went to Danceteria because I was from New Jersey. I was a moron from northern New Jersey. I knew nothing about the world of Manhattan, but I did know that I was tired of the whole disco thing. Disco, now when you're young, you hear it and it's wonderful music. But back then, living through it, it touched on every aspect of culture. the way you dressed, the way you act, the way you interacted, where you went socially, your mentality, and it was so ubiquitous. It was choking. And I went on a field trip with my one of my schools to I think the Museum of Natural History, and there were these newsstands, and I picked up a copy of the Village Voice, which was a famous newspaper that had wonderful full articles, but they had like 50 pages of nightlife listings. And I'm looking at it thinking, what is it? What are these places? And Danceteria had a full page ad of all the bands coming and all the DJs that were playing there. And what is this? So armed with that curiosity, and then the fake ID, which I went in on the weekend to do, I got on the Port Authority bus and went right to Playland, and I got this fake ID. And by the way, just to give you a comparison of what was happening back then and what's happening now, in the 5 boroughs of New York City, there were something like 25,000 liquor serving nightlife establishments across the city. Now there are less than 2,500. So the economics impacted what was possible, and now it's just a different era. But I went in with my fake ID, and I think the guys at the door were like, "All right, come on," because they knew that the guys coming in from out of town, and I looked like I was from out of town. The people coming in who were starving for this, from New Jersey, from Brooklyn, from the Bronx, they called us the bridge and tunnel people in a derogatory way. But we paid full price. We paid for our drinks. We were happy to do it. We didn't care about getting comped. We were just thrilled to be there. So they, in a way, were kind of like, all right, come on in, because we were going to drop back then, $40 or $50, and that was pretty great for them to have all of these kids coming in that were just starving for this experience. And I didn't understand what I was seeing. They had walls of TVs that looked like they were scrounged from yard sales, all showing the same thing: creative burgeoning videography, video art. There were paintings on the walls. In fact, there's a famous story that Jean-Michel Basquiat, the painter, was hired to do a mural before he really exploded at Danceteria, and he got an advance of $250, but he just painted up little stuff and he didn't finish it. So that's just incredible. But and then there are these people with makeup and the outfits, and I'm dressed like this buffoon right straight out of Jersey, and I'm kind of just hugging the walls. Not that I was afraid. I was just, please don't detect that I don't belong here, because I'll be taken up at the scruff of my neck. And what was also astounding, Luke, was the music. There were 5 floors in this club. It was a former factory. So you had these huge open expanses with these tremendous ceilings, and every floor had something different going on. There was live bands on one floor. There were DJs on different floors, but everyone was playing the kind of stuff that they were into. So depending upon which floor you were on, you were hearing punk, you were hearing reggae, you were hearing this crazy stuff where people were talking over the beat, rap, electronic music, Kraftwerk from Europe. And what I'm trying to do with my live stream, Danceteria Rewind, is saying, okay, if we took all 5 floors, put them into one 2-hour block, and had all that variety just crisscrossing into each other, this is what it was like. So I don't do any talking except the beginning and the end of the show, and I beat match the songs from one to the other. I found the common beats, I found the common chord progressions, and I match them. So you can't really tell where one's beginning and one's ending. You're just feeling it, and I accentuate it with definite improved bass resonance. So it's like you're in a club and you hear it's just boom hitting you, and you're getting this tour of this slice of existence. And there's music that's from France, from Germany, all of these different things that were being played in that one crazy club. And it all came to me during the height of the pandemic. I realized I had no hobbies. I was just eating and working and trying not to die. And so it inspired me to do that because in a previous career I had been a DJ. I had a radio show called The Groove Boutique. It was aired on smooth jazz radio stations across the country in the aughts. But then when that format fell into the dumpster, thus my DJ career did as well. So I wanted to do it, but I do something DJing, but no, I couldn't do it in a club, and no one cared who I was. So I thought, okay, let's not make this about me. Let's make this about this experience. That will have more appeal than the me show. Who cares about me? Nobody cares about me, but they would care about this landmark triptych audio exploration that I provide each week. And I do live chatting, and the audience is primarily in their 20s and 30s, and they're saying, what is this? Oh, I know this song. They stole this from so-and-so. I say, no, so-and-so stole this from that. And it's wonderful. There are some people who were there, so it brings back memories. But overall, people are just looking to escape and take this trip with me, and they love the way they feel when they hear it.
Are there any songs you have played that you distinctly remember hearing inside Danceteria?
Oh, yeah. In fact, what I do is I'm playing things that I know were played based on my research of DJ playlists, songs that were probably played just based on my knowledge of what would have worked there. And then if I was DJing, this is what I would have also played. So there are definite songs. Obviously, Everybody by Madonna was played, and it was produced by her boyfriend at the time, Mark Kamens, who was the celebrity. He was the guy. He was the DJ because he just pulled it all together with all of these different genres. But what they did was, and I do play some popular songs that may have been on the radio or may have been on MTV, but I don't play the versions you know. I play the expanded DJ B-sides, which are longer, and they do all sorts of dub effects, and there's the bass is pumped up. So you hear it and you go, I know this, but I've never heard this. Same as with Everybody. There's barely any singing of Madonna. Mark is taking certain lines and echoing them and bouncing them. So it's appropriate for that nightlife experience. And you can't buy it on iTunes. It's not available. You can't. The only place you can find it is if you have it on vinyl, or if you go to YouTube and then you convert it to an MP3. So I have it on vinyl, and I have a vinyl converter, and I played it, and people go, where did you find this? Because they had never heard it before, or they remembered it. So it's those kinds of things that there is familiarity in the show, but not a cut and paste familiarity, because it's not Club MTV. I'm not doing that. There are some tracks that were popular that did make it on MTV, but not the versions that I play. In fact,
Right.
a lot of them you have never heard in your life, and I find them quite better. Like there's some mixes I have of The Clash, of different tracks of theirs, where if you listen to the video and if you listen to the ones that were on the radio, the versions, it's all very concentrated and smashed together. It's great, but these let the tracks breathe, and you can hear, oh my God, I didn't realize that guitar was in there. Listen to that bass line, and holy, listen to those drums. So it really gives you a chance to experience these songs that you are familiar with in a totally different way. It's like, why didn't they release these commercially?
Well, and it's fascinating that you talk about the expansiveness of it, of some of these mixes. I was thinking the same time. I'm a huge Duran Duran fan, and when they released back in 1998, I think it was, they released the night versions CD and collected all the for those who are listening and don't know what the night versions are, they were the remixes, in effect, when they call them night versions.
Right.
And a lot of them, I know, like the early ones, the band went in and re-recorded the entire song. Mm-hmm. But then some of the versions were like these like stretched out version, and they highlight this part and this part. And I went, this is fascinating. Like I'm learning about these songs all over again that I've heard for years. This was a commonplace thing before we started to really remix songs and turn them into something totally different.
Right.
That was relatively a commonplace thing, right, in the early 1980s?
Yes. And what I liked about it, and you hit it on the head, Luke, it's not, let's add all this other stuff on top that was never in the original. It's, let's listen to the original tracks and open them up and accentuate them and break everything down, so you just hear one guitar doing a lick. And wow, I had no idea. But you're right, in remixing of the past 20 or so years, there's all of these things that are thrown on top, that are thrown in, which are fine, but it's not capturing the original essence of what was there and doing it in a clever way. But what I think Duran Duran did was phenomenal, because it was like, okay, you want the 3-minute version, we've got it, but at 3 a.m. this is the version you want to hear. And I can't remember who they hired, but they obviously got people in there who knew what was appropriate for a late night nightlife experience, and then taking this song and just turning it up to 11 and smashing it apart. And you enjoy it in a completely different way.
I've also noted over time, looking at like going right to the big name, Madonna, and her first singles. If you look on the charts, it took a while for the Hot 100 to catch up, but you see, like Lucky Star was out in the summer of '83, whereas it wasn't a pop hit till like late summer, autumn of '84, way ahead of time. Which then mentally slotting that sound, a very bright poppy sound, slotted in a year earlier, it sounds even more progressive, because you're older than me, so you would have caught a lot more music at the time. I was, to be blunt, I was born in '78, so back in '83, and I was watching a little bit of MTV, but I wasn't capturing it as much. I didn't hear as much. So from your perspective, having heard more and more, as those songs start hitting the club, what I'm getting at is #1 dance club hits, spring, summer, autumn '83, before their pop. And you're starting to hear this stuff from her first album coming into the clubs. You already know everybody. Your reaction at that point to this sonic nature, how much of an impact were you hearing with your own ears?
It was pretty remarkable, Luke, and I think you hit it on the head, that the clubs back then, at least, they led the way to where the pop charts followed. And you could pinpoint what was popular in the clubs, Danceteria, but also elsewhere. And then a year later, that's where pop is going. So what was radical and over the top and bold, it took a little while to catch on, but that became the approach, or the sound, or the techniques that were used. Then it's like a slow boil. Everybody just starts getting used to it because everyone starts implementing them. But yeah, it really, and I did work at a radio station in New York called WBLS, which was an R&B station, and they would call the stores to ask what were the top selling songs, and rather albums or 12-inch singles at the time. They would call the DJs in the clubs and ask what was really moving the floor. So they reflected what the taste was of what the populace was doing. And they did it insanely accurate. There was no joke. Their research was so serious, and they made it a priority, because it's almost like, the guy who's the program director, Frankie Crocker, said, look, I don't know everything. I can't be everywhere, but I want to reflect what everyone is telling me I should be playing. And that's a fresh mentality that we can't have that in radio now. It's very, very hard to have something like that. But back then, he was the mirror. He mirrored what the people were telling him in the streets. And then, as to your point, year and a half later, what he was detecting became the lingua franca. Everybody was doing it.
Which songs, or was there, like, if you had to choose like one or two or three that in your time going to the club, and any of the other clubs, I know, like, you've listed some of the other ones in some of your interviews, Mud Club, et cetera, Limelight. Which were the songs that had the biggest impact on you, where you heard it and went, whoa, what is this? And it still sticks with you all these years later.
There was a track by Derek Lauro, who's a reggae performer, and he did a stunning reggae version of Don't Stop Till You Get Enough by Michael Jackson. And that's one, like, as you could put the needle down and no one knew it, and within a minute, everybody's is grooving to this. And it didn't just happen at the reggae clubs. It happened, some songs that just exploded across downtown. And you had to play them. And if you listen now to it, it is just as fresh. It's all live musicians. There's nothing programmed about it. And his enthusiasm and energy, and he's singing in Michael Jackson falsetto, but with a Jamaican twang. That's one of the key ones. Don't You Want Me by the Human League, the B-side dub, not the one you've heard on the radio, but if you can find, if you go on iTunes, they call it the dance mix. But the producer of that band, Martin Rushent, that's just a prime example of, I'm going to throw in every studio trick and just to make my go totally over the top. And there's tape edits, and there's echo, and there's all of this stuff that when you're either listening on headphones or in a club, it's, what have they done here? And it's him kind of saying, I got some skills, son, check it out. But that's another one. And what was amazing, Luke, is that you could play that in a Black or Hispanic hip hop club, and they lost their minds. They lost their minds because those techniques, all the hip hop guys started using them. All the hip hop producers started taking every single thing that they did and putting it into electro and techno. There was another song by the Bush Tetras called Too Many Freaks, I think. And that's another thing. They were a band. There were, between 81 and 83, there were bands, human bands, that were making music that was played in the nightclubs. They were former punks, and they liked the idea of disco, but they hated disco music. So they said, let's make punk you can dance to. And that's what they did. There was Liquid Liquid and ESG and Conk and the Bush Tetras, and they're all from Lower Manhattan. And they made this stunning offering of music. It was just a small time frame, like 81 to 82, 83. And it was punk, danceable punk that everybody across all genres loved. There's a few more tracks, ESG's Moody, Liquid Liquid Cavern. And if you're a hip hop head, you could listen to those and say, oh yeah, that was sampled in 300 songs. And it's still being sampled. Mm-hmm. So that was something really special about that time, is this idea of rock bands. And a lot of them had female vocalists. And I don't mean like Madonna female vocalists. I mean a female vocalist who played guitar, who co-wrote the songs and ripped it on stage. It was pretty progressive and pretty egalitarian. So it was really exciting to see that kind of open-mindedness, because there were no lanes, no barriers. You make something, it kicks, we're using it. It could be huge.
You found keep going.
No, it was much more open-minded. And then you mentioned something about house and some of those other later genres. There was house and there was freestyle. And as the 80s progressed, clubs started not being quite so open-minded with the programming. They became very slotted. This is a house club. This is a freestyle club. This is a jungle house club. This is a drum and bass club. And that's all you could hear. You could not hear anything from anywhere else. And so the idea of what was happening at Danceteria was done. But those other great genres came about, but it was much more segregated, unfortunately. Music.
Is there anywhere in the country, in the world, I know with New York, and I haven't only been there once in the 90s, so I'm far from anyone who would be able to know. I don't know that there was a place in New York, but anywhere you could find something, is there akin to Danceteria, where there's some sort of maybe a socioeconomic environment where that, again, the conditions are kind of ripe for that, or somewhere where there's more of that, yeah, let's throw everything in. Maybe there's something we don't know about, there's somewhere around the world, but is there something like that anywhere?
As far as playing the contemporary music, multi-genre mashing together, no idea. I think it would be very hard. You'd have to have a lot of open-minded people who'd want to dig something like that. As far as reproductions or recreations of that, I am actually available for gigs. No, I really, I would like to eventually take this on the road, and I do see it having some legs, but I've never seen any DJs or clubs doing this exact, okay, we're going to start in 81, going to go to 86, and this is what we're going to capture. And it's going to be this underground thing, multi-genre thing.
I'd love to see
And
if you try on that,
oh,
just to see if someone would take on it.
Loop, believe me, I'm going to be ready when they call.
I hope so. We keep listening to it. I'm looking forward to this next Thursday night, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I can't listen to everyone, but I love at least capturing some of it. I've seen a good number of dub versions listed in there.
Yes.
You mentioned reggae earlier, and then there's the tie to dub. What was so significant about dub versions around that time in that general area, and then stretching back earlier into circa 73, 74? Why would that have been so big and so meaningful at that time?
There were reggae producers who were using this technique called dub. They pioneered it, and it had to do with dramatically increasing the bass frequencies, ripping down the structure of the song, very minimal approach, and then taking certain either vocal lines or certain musical lines and just pressing the echo. So it would go da 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 da, and it was very trippy and very pioneering. In fact, what I find the most exciting developments come about when the people who are using the equipment don't know how to use it, and they make these happy mistakes, and everybody just goes, "Whoa!" And I think that's what happened with dub. Somebody just pressed the wrong button and it flipped their lids, and then everyone started doing it. So it was a reggae thing for years and years and years. And then there was a track that came out called Love Money by Bo Funk and the Funk Masters in London, which took a jazzy up-tempo approach to dub and took all the dub techniques, but rather than like a 67 BPM or really low, it was 120 BPM. So it was made for your feet. And it became one of those tracks where everybody just said, what the hell was that? And it became so popular that when it came over here through the import record shops, the DJs all just never heard, because they were not connected with the dub world. And then they heard it and they immediately wanted to start doing it in their own productions. The Clash, very pioneering, used dub a lot because they lived and breathed reggae. So they got the dub guys, the mixer guys, the producers to do dub versions of their songs, or when they were producing them to use dub techniques. So it's definitely made for your feet, but it's also made for your head. Because if you listen to it with a gummy or something, I don't know, not that I recommend that, kids, but if you do, it's it's a trip. And it was before sophisticated synthesizers or electronics. It was just using echoes and little 8-track boards, just very basic stuff. But they were able to find these techniques that they still sound just astounding. So yeah, it started with reggae, started with Jamaica.
You were referencing that a little bit in the chat from this past Thursday. So mapping that out, and you talked about the BPM increase, and so I was curious. I went, okay, let's play along with this. So I had the list of the songs. I copied that down, and then I went into like a BPM thing. Like, all right, let's map this out. I'm like, yep, starts in like 85, 89, 92, 93, 98, 107. It's picking up.
Right.
It's starting with, like, I know Eric B and Rakim were towards the beginning. By the end, you're up to Haircut 100 and the Jam this past Thursday night in particular.
Exactly.
So when you're setting a given night, a given Thursday, like you're then this next one's coming up in 2 nights from now.
Yeah.
How do you, outside of knowing that you want to go certain styles, certain BPMs,
right,
but how do you select the actual songs and artists for a given night?
Crazy ass, way too much time spent planning the show, Luke. I want to make sure I'm incorporating tracks that were big at Danceteria and artists that were big at Danceteria. Also, that they fall within this 81 to 86 time frame, and also making sure that I'm ramping up with the BPMs all the way through, and that I can do a beat match. So if I've got a cold ending, that's great. That's the easiest way to do a beat match. But if not, I try to find the ones that end with drums and then start with drums or start with an a cappella and do it that way. But I'm always mindful of, is this historically accurate? Is it diverse in terms of genre? And is it kicking? I don't want to go too heavy on electronic stuff. I don't want to do an electronic song into an electronic song. I want to do an electronic song into a salsa boogaloo thing. That is kind of fun. And that's another thing that with Hispanic Heritage Month about to hit us, the Latin influence on that scene there. And then not just that scene, but across the pond to England. Nobody has talked about this. And I'll give you a perfect example using New Order, because we all love New Order. New Order, their first trip to New York, they came and they stayed in the apartment of a woman named Ruth Polsky, who was the booking person at Danceteria. They stayed in her apartment because they were going to be doing a bunch of dates at Danceteria. They stayed at Ruth's place. So when they weren't rehearsing or performing, they were hanging out in New York, and they heard stuff they had never heard before, specifically a lot of this Latin stuff from the Fania label, Latin boogaloo and shingling, and these rhythms and these chord progressions and syncopation that they had never been accustomed to. So up until that point, all of their tracks were 4 on the floor, disco, like Blue Monday. As soon as they got into the studio, after this New York experience, they came up with Confusion, which was all syncopated, all Latin rhythms. So there's a perfect example of group from England coming to New York, being influenced by Latin rhythms, putting out a song, and then those drum beats influenced the freestyle producers. And they did like a cut and paste of the beats from Confusion and the drum machines from Confusion. So it's just bum ba bum ba bum. So that happened all the time. Constantly undertone and an overflow of Latin culture, Latin sounds into this music that had tremendous reverberations that then came back over here, and the Latin audience were, yeah, cool, okay, this is all right. Yeah, that feeding and cross-cultural sharing was just so exciting to see.
So from the historic perspective, then, what is Danceteria's role / legacy in Hispanic Heritage Month? How can it be best, I guess, quantified?
They were the meeting place. They were where the things crisscrossed. Were it not for Danceteria, you would not have had such a rapid opportunity for things to bounce off of each other, because there was no censorship of anything. You could hear in one night Kid Creole and the Coconuts, which was very August Darnell, the leader of the band, was Dominican, so he was always using Latin rhythms in what he was doing. You could hear punk, you could hear rap, and everything was all out there, and you couldn't help, if you're an artist, walk away and start thinking, how can I use that in what I'm doing? And Danceteria was the only club where that cross-fertilization was so vibrant. So it facilitated a lot of really creative stuff that happened and just spiraled out of control.
Have you heard from any, I guess, more prominent, you say, again, these were the influencers of that era. Have you heard from anyone who was around there at the time that stumbled across the Twitch channel and gone, oh my gosh, wow, you brought this back?
A guy named Sal Principato, who was the leader of a band called Liquid Liquid. They had a track called Cavern, which was an anthem, and it became the basis for White Lines by Grandmaster Flash. They rapped over that track. They reproduced it, but and then Missy Elliott, no, LL Cool J, he also took that track and rapped over it. And Duran Duran did a cover of White Lines on their, I think, Thank You album. So Sal Principato has had his hands in some heavy duty stuff, and he opened up for LCD Sound System when they did their final tour a couple of years ago. The leader of the band, James Murphy, said, I want Liquid Liquid opening for me. So, and they've been on Letterman. So I'm doing the chat one night, and I happened to be playing Liquid Liquid, and I saw some guy chat, Sal P. He said, hey man, great choice. one of my faves from back in the day. And I went, is this the Sal P? And he went, you know it. And people were freaking out in the chat room because they couldn't believe. And he read the Billboard article just like you. So that was pretty breathtaking for that to happen. Yeah, that was the biggest one.
That's absolutely wild. Well, I'm glad you're doing this. This is the cool thing is there's still music discovery for some of us that didn't get to go to Danceteria.
Sure.
I'm discovering music all the time. I mean, I'm constantly Wikipediaing the stuff that comes up like, oh, what's this? What's this? And it doesn't have to be new. I mean, all of it, to paraphrase the old NBC must-see TV thing, if you haven't seen it yet, it's new to you. It's true with the music too. So thanks for doing this. How long do you plan to do Danceteria Rewind?
As long as it brings me joy, and it does every week. It's an outlet for me. It uses a different side of my brain than what I do during the day work-wise. And also the people that tune in, they're making appointment listening, perfect radio term, and they're giving me 2 hours of their week, and I am very grateful. And what drives me is, you think that blew you away last week? I'll wait till this week. I'm always seeking to make it better, to improve it, because it's like anything else. Once you think you've got the audience figured out, or once you're trying to cut and paste it and phone it in, you're done. You might as well not be doing it anymore. So I am always striving to deliver something that will take their breath away, and I endeavor to do that every week.
Very cool. Well, keep it up. It's awesome. Danceteria Rewind on Twitch. If anyone watching this is not on Twitch, we'll just Google Danceteria Rewind Twitch. Easy to get there. And
it's free. It's free.
Totally free, and then just play it. And you get 2 hours of awesome dance music and everything imaginable. Rafe, thanks for taking time to chat and be listening to this next Thursday and other assorted Thursdays going down the road.
Luke, you are a gentleman. I thank you so much for wanting to talk to me, and I really appreciate your enthusiasm about what I'm doing, and I hope you continue to enjoy it.
I definitely will. All the best. Take care, and we'll listen to you down the road.
Cheers, my man. Thank you very, very much.